If there's one thing you want to take away from this video, is that you should use more hip firing. Just look at all those hips. The game has given you all the sign from every angles, and you keeps ignoring it. Hello guys, my name is Realsuke. I made videos about gacha game, especially Zenless Zone Zero, and made some guide about it. But I also happens to have few thousand hours on shooter game. I got consistent diamond in Overwatch and Apex Legend. I was the sniper one trick back when I was in Overwatch, and gradually expand myself and train myself to be able to use AR and submachine gun in mid-range fight and close-range fight. And I do consider myself as an all-rounder, so I think I'm adequate enough to talk about most of the weapon in the game. And the best way to describe my skill levels is, my skill levels is at between top 10 to top 15%. So if you are playing at the very high levels, you're gonna see that some of my guide and tips is gonna look kind of cheesy, but I think it's gonna be applicable to about 80 to 90% of the player base. And if you're completely new to the FPS game, this is the right video for you. And if you're playing at the very high levels, this video should be able to help you save some time to figure out the game's mechanics. So this video is going to be focusing on explaining the mechanics of each kind of weapon and how to apply it in the fight, and most importantly, how to practice it. So let's go over the basic mechanics of the game along with assault rifle. I think majority of the shooter game player is more comfortable with the assault rifle in the game more than PDDs with the baby oil. It's the oldest weapon in the shooter game before the Jesus Christ was born. So let's start with the hip fire and ADS. So basically, hip fire, the bullet pattern is going to be spread with a little bit of recoil, and when you ADS, it would becomes very accurate. It would hit right in the middle of your crosshair. Shoulder aim works the same way as hip fire does, but with tighter spread. It's typically not useful unless you jump and shoulder aim, and you could keybind the setting here. And with various kind of recoil pattern, depends on which AR you're using. Like Michelle's weapon is gonna drift to the right, while Ming's weapon is gonna drift to the left. And the way to combat the recoil is to move the exact opposite direction to maintain your aim on the target, which is one of the oldest tricks in the book since CSGO. And I would highly suggest that you don't need to learn the whole recoil pattern. You only need to learn half of it. Like for Michelle, you wanna default yourself to move your mouse to the left, while Ming, you wanna default yourself to drag your mouse to the right to counter the recoil pattern. And this part is important. And if you're coming from CSGO and Valorant, tapping wouldn't reset the recoil pattern. It would continue the pattern. It actually takes a while for it to reset, and maybe you should use those time to get behind a cover or turn yourself into a paper to completely reset it. Strafing and jumping wouldn't affect your weapon's accuracy. You wouldn't mess your recoil pattern even if you are moving left and right. And this is the pattern that I fire moving left and right. The last bullet is at the same height, so I think we can realistically assume that the recoil pattern is exactly the same, and that emerged another technique that being widely shared, which is jump and ADS, or you can double jump and ADS, and it wouldn't ruin the accuracy of the weapon. But what I have noticed is that a lot of people use this technique in the worst way possible. They double jump in straight line right into my gun's barrel, which is a recipe of disaster for the FPS game. It's just a little bit better than walking in the straight line into your opponent's gun barrel. The whole point of the double jump is to avoid getting shot while being able to deal the damage. And no, you shouldn't jump at the long range and the mid range. You only want to jump in the close range. And the videos that gone viral also do it in a close range fight. And the target is stationary. It would be much harder to aim if target is jumping out in the closer range, but I bet that he could still ADS him down because I saw that a lot in the Apex professional levels of plays. But it's definitely too hard for majority of the player. I couldn't see myself doing that. And of course you could ADS on your enemy, but I would highly suggest that unless your aim is like super good, I wouldn't suggest you to ADS it because you would probably miss all of it, and it's better to just hip fire it. I would suggest suggest majority of the player to just hip fire it when you are jumping around the enemies. So what you have to do is that like you could do your first jump to the left and jump to the right on second jump, and the momentum would be cancelled and it's gonna make enemy harder to shoot at you. And you should practice shoulder aim while jumping after you get used to it to tighten the spread. It's absolutely crazy and it's not as hard as ADSing. And the only scenario that you would double jump in the straight line is when you wanna jump over enemy's head or when you are jumping unpredictably, so that you have to first initiate to shot at your enemy first because it's harder to predict your position that way. And apparently you wanna use ADS in the long range, even though ADS would deal more damage in the mid range because it doesn't have spread like hip fire, but you're basically a sitting duck while you are ADSing. So what you're gonna do is ADS when opponent is not looking at you, and use hip fire while strafing when enemy is shooting you back, so that the enemy will have harder time to shoot back at you. And you almost wanna always use hip fire when you are at the close range. And as for the submachine gun, it basically behaves the same way as assault rifle, but with more emphasis in the closer range. So you definitely want to practice your aim on hip fire and not only just ADSing. And this is the basic way to practice it, is to keep your crosshair on the enemy while you're strafing like this. And you might want to jump and shoot or double jump and shoot while hip firing. The accuracy on the hip fire with submachine gun is crazy, and you should practice shoulder aim while jumping after you get used to it to tighten the spread. And of course, it's also deal respectable amounts of damage in the mid-long range. And the hardest thing about the submachine gun is that you have to learn the map in order to use it effectively. You try to get close to the enemy to the effective range, and the key is be unpredictable. Heavy machine gun behaves exactly the same way as submachine gun and assault rifle, except that the hip fire is a lot more spread, but it's complemented with high damage, making its hip fire very respectable. And in sentry mode, it has absolutely no recoil with very tight spread. So when I play other FPS game, I gotta be honest with you guys, even if I put 100 hours into shotgun, I'm still suck at it. So I would rather not to talk about it at all, in case if I give the wrong advice. And yeah, sorry for the thumbnail. It's actually master all gun except shotgun. The most important thing about the single shot rifle is you gotta find the tempo of it. Like let's say if I spam it, it's gonna recoil. So you don't want to spam it. But if I tap it slowly and find out the right tempo that is not gonna ruin your aim, and keep this tempo in mind, and then proceed to go to the practice range and then shoot accordingly with that rhythm that you just learned. So you're gonna be able to deal a lot of damage in this way while not compromising the aim. And different gun would have different tempo, like Nobunaga would have faster tempo. And there's this mechanics that I would like to share, is that technically you are not able to do quick scope with this rifle. Let's say if I shot here and I try to quick scope it, you're gonna see that your bullet is gonna spread, so it takes a split second for it to stabilize. So keep that in mind. And the other most important thing about the single shot rifle, you should definitely spend a lot of time practice your hip firing, because the hip fire in this gun is super crazy. Even though it's not perfectly accurate, it's gonna save you a lot of time in the close fight. And by the way, strafing and jumping while ADSing isn't going to affect your accuracy. And the same mechanics also apply to the sniper rifle. You could strafe, you could jump, and you also cannot quick scope it. You have to wait until the end of the animation for it to be stabilized. And sniper rifle is the only gun that cannot hip fire accurately, so better swap your sub weapon. And the crosshair of your hip fire is aligned with the scope, so you could use the hip fire crosshair to aim first then scope in. You don't want to scope first then aim. And for those of you who are new to the sniper, I could understand the struggle of being one. It actually took me a month or two to be a baseline competent sniper, and the first technique that every competent sniper are using, even at the plat levels are using, is called flicking. So I'm gonna demonstrate this in the exaggerated way so you could understand what am I doing. So basically flicking is I keep my eyes on the target, then I proceed to click on it with my muscle memory. And you can also do the right flicks. But in practice, you want to keep your crosshair a little bit closer to your enemy before you flick it, because obviously when you place your crosshair close to your enemy, it's gonna be easier to shoot. And the further you place your crosshair, it's gonna get harder. So what you want to do is that, let's say if I want to shoot at this target, I want to aim generally with my hip fire first, and then my crosshair is already close to it. Your eyes is always on the enemy and not on the crosshair. Then you flick it with the muscle memory. You can also place your crosshair at the head levels, and then you shoot it when the crosshair and the target are aligned so that you don't need to complicate things. I would use flicking 80% of the time and use this simple technique for like 20% of the time, especially when I'm doing one-on-one with another sniper. I do it a lot when I wait for the other sniper to peek their head out, but generally you wanna flick most of the time. And boy, it's gonna take a lot of practice. And let me practice it slowly for you guys. So basically you wanna keep switching the target. You can also use your movement to adjust your crosshair. And the better you look at the target, the more likely you're gonna hit it, and keep your eyes on the target and not the crosshair. So when I'm doing this action bolt movement, my eyes is already on the target, so that would largely reduce my time to aim at the target. So you are already aiming when you are not even in the scope, and that would make your aim faster. Alright, I hope that's helped.